In 1975, Freddie Mercury arrived in Japan for the first time. He had just come from America, where the sheer heart attack tour had been dogged by bad luck canceled dates, strained vocal cords, the specific frustration of a band trying to break the most important music market in the world, and failing to do it cleanly. Japan was supposed to be a smaller stop. A different kind of market. Less pressure. And then the plane landed, and the fans were at the airport, and what Freddie Mercury encountered was something he had not encountered anywhere else in the world. They bowed. They were quiet. They offered gifts carefully wrapped, formally presented, with the specific ceremony of a culture that understood the difference between admiration and invasion. They did not scream. They did not grab. They looked at him with the specific quality of people who had decided that his presence was an honor rather than a possession. Freddie Mercury had been famous in Britain. He had been famous in America. He had never been treated like this. He went back every year for the next decade. He went back in 1986, after the band's last Japanese tour, without a concert to play, simply to be there. And when Peter Freestone, who had been with him across all of those visits, was asked to describe what Japan gave Freddie Mercury that nowhere else gave him, he said, Freddie felt some sort of contentment in Japan he found nowhere else. This video is about that contentment, about what it was, about why it required Japan to produce it, and about the room in a Kensington townhouse that held it long after the visit stopped. Queen's first visit to Japan was in April and May 1975, the sheer heart attack tour. From the moment the band arrived, something was different. The fans at Nippon Budokan were the largest audiences Queen had played to that point. They were also the most orderly. The screaming was there, but underneath it was a disciplined reverence Freddie Mercury had not encountered anywhere else. He was photographed at Nagoya Castle on April 22nd, wearing the Hungarian flame weave jacket. The expression, genuinely pleased. Not the performer's pleased expression. The real one. The audiences had learned the words to songs in a language not their own, had bought Queen records months before the British press took the band seriously. He bought his first kimono on that trip. He never stopped. What Japan gave Freddie Mercury was something that almost no place on earth could give him by the late 1970s. The ability to walk down the street. This sounds like a small thing. It was not. By 1977, by 1979, by 1981, Freddie Mercury could not walk down most streets in London or Los Angeles or New York without being recognized, approached, photographed, or followed. The specific quality of his face, the cheekbones, the teeth, the way he held himself even in private, meant that recognition was almost unavoidable in the countries where Queen's fame was fully established. Japan was different. Not because Freddie Mercury was unknown there. He was extremely well known there, but because Japanese fan culture in this period had a specific and disciplined understanding of the distinction between public and private space. If Freddie Mercury was walking on a street in Tokyo, the people who recognized him understood that the street was not a concert, that the street was not an interview, that a person on a street, even a famous person, was a private person. They looked. Sometimes they bowed slightly from a respectful distance. And then they let him walk. He could browse in a shop. He could look at an antique without being watched doing it. He could be, in the specific and quiet way that he could almost never be anywhere else, simply himself in a public space. Simply himself in a public space. This is what Freddie Mercury was looking for every time he went back to Japan. Not the concerts. Not the adulation. The specific quality of a public space that did not consume him. He had said in an interview that he was loved by thousands, but felt like the loneliest man in the world. The loneliness of extreme fame is a specific and paradoxical condition. The more visible you are, the less you can be seen. Every public space becomes a performance space. Every walk down a street becomes an event. Every purchase in a shop becomes a potential headline. Japan gave him back the ordinary. The shop where you could spend an hour with a woodblock print without anyone making it into a story. The antique dealer who understood that a customer looking at a piece of lacquerware was a customer looking at a piece of lacquerware, not a celebrity to be photographed. The street where walking was walking. He loved Japan for many reasons. The art, the culture, the food, the specific aesthetic of a civilization that had, for centuries, understood that beauty was not decoration, but a way of thinking. But underneath all of it, he loved Japan because Japan gave him back the thing that fame had taken. The ordinary. Misa Watanabe was Freddie Mercury's personal guide in Japan. Her husband was, as Peter Freestone described him, Mr. Suntory. She understood what Freddie needed when he visited, the specific combination of access and privacy. It was Misa who arranged for the department stores to stay open after hours. The crowd's gone. The staff still at their counters. Every item available. Peter Freestone has described it. It was great to walk around the department store after it was closed, and all the people working there had to stay behind waiting at their counters for Freddie to go round making his choice. Purchases packed and sent to the hotel. Payment sorted with Misa later. The full access without the exposure. The art without the audience. The shopping without the performance. In September 1986, Freddie Mercury made his final visit to Japan. The band's touring years were over. There were no concerts to play. He went anyway. He and Jim Hutton flew to Tokyo, spent time in the city's boutiques and antique shops, and then took the bullet train to Kyoto. In Kyoto, Freddie bought lacquered candlesticks, ornate hibachis, a Buddhist temple table, silver sake kettles, and then Misa Watanabe made a specific arrangement. The Rokuon-ji, the temple of the Golden Pavilion, Kinkaku-ji, one of the most visited places in Japan, was closed to the public for renovation work. Misa arranged for them to enter anyway. Freddie Mercury and Jim Hutton walked through the grounds of the Golden Pavilion alone. No crowd. No tourists. No cameras. Just the garden and the trees and the flowers and the gold and the water. They walked for hours. Jim Hutton has described this visit in the specific way of someone who watched another person receive something they needed. Freddie moved through the garden the way he moved through the antique shops, slowly, attentively, without the performance that the presence of an audience always produced. The temple, empty except for them. The garden, entirely his, for as long as he wanted it. He stayed for hours. Freddie Mercury had been collecting kimonos since 1975. By the time of his death, the collection was extraordinary in scope and quality. Furisode, homongi, maisen. The full range of Japanese formal dress across the Taisho and Showa periods. He wore them on stage. He wore them at home. In the specific way of someone who has found a form of clothing that expresses something Western clothing does not express. The kimono parties at Garden Lodge are documented evenings where Freddie would bring out the collection and drape kimonos over his guests. The stage performances, Freddie Mercury at the Hammersmith Odeon in 1975, wearing the red furisode he had bought in Japan. The rock stage transformed by a garment that said something rock stages were not supposed to say. He wore it because he loved it. That was the only reason he ever needed. That was the only reason he ever needed. And the collection, which had begun with a single kimono bought on the 1975 tour and had grown over 10 years of annual visits into one of the largest private collections of Japanese art in the United Kingdom, was also a record of the visits. Each piece, a specific shop, a specific day, a specific transaction in a specific city. The woodblock prints, the lacquerware, the ceramics, the hakata, dolls, the porcelain figures painted with lifelike colors that sat in glass cases around Garden Lodge, the antique suitate partition, decorated with carp, which stood in front of the fireplace in the Japanese room and mirrored the koi pond in the garden outside. Each object, Japan, brought to Kensington. The collection was not the hobby of a celebrity who had bought some things on tour because they were beautiful. It was the archive of a person who had found, in the art of another culture, a specific kind of language for things they could not say in the language they had grown up with. Freddie Mercury, who had spent his entire career making the invisible visible through music, had found in Japanese art a visual equivalent. The objects said what the music said in a different register. He kept them all. He kept them at Garden Lodge. He had them around him until he died. The Japanese room at Garden Lodge was not for parties. The rest of the house was a place of extraordinary gatherings. The Japanese room was different. Ground floor. Door closed, except by invitation. David MacDonald, the Sotheby's expert who cataloged the estate, described it: a room dedicated to privacy, study, and comfort far, far removed from his stage world. To be invited into that space was a big honor. It was not for everyone. The antique furniture, the Edo to show a period porcelain, the lacquered boxes, the Japan chairs with pagoda-like backs, the suite partition. The baby grand piano decorated with chinoiserie scenes, bought in New York and shipped to London. On the walls, the woodblock prints. Hiroshai. The room, private. The collection, inside it. The door, closed to everyone except the people he had decided to trust with it. Peter Freestone has described walking through the Japanese room the way you describe walking through a place that reveals the interior of a person you thought you knew. The collection was not random. It had coherence. It had argument. The specific quality of a collection assembled by someone who had spent 15 years learning the periods, the artists, the techniques. Freddie Mercury was not a casual collector. He was, by the time of his death, acknowledged as having one of the largest private collections of antique Japanese woodblock prints in the United Kingdom. Not a celebrity vanity collection. The collection of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and what he was doing. 15 years of annual visits, 15 years of auction houses and dealers, and a room in Kensington closed to the world, was building a private language. A way of holding what the stage could not hold. A way of holding what the stage could not hold. Freddie Mercury said once that he was loved by thousands, but felt like the loneliest man in the world. He said, in another interview, that he was a romantic who put up a barrier around himself, so it was hard for people to get in and know the real him. Japan did not solve this. Nothing solves this. The specific loneliness of the condition he described is not solvable by a country or a collection or a room. But Japan gave him something in the direction of a solution. The fans who bowed and did not grab. The streets where he could walk. The antique dealers who let him look the department store after hours, every counter attended, no audience. Misa Watanabe, who understood what he needed and provided it with the specific grace of someone who had decided his comfort mattered. The Rokuon-ji garden in the September afternoon with Jim Hutton. The gold of the pavilion on the water. Hours of walking without being watched. These are the things Japan gave him. Not the concerts. Not the adulation. The specific and quiet experience of being in a place that allowed him to be a person. September 1986 was the last time Freddie Mercury visited Japan. He was 40 years old. The Magic Tour had just ended. After Nebworth, he went to Japan. Not to perform. To be there. To walk the streets of Tokyo. With Jim Hutton. To take the bullet train to Kyoto. He bought the tan gray suit from the Beverly Hills boutique, too big for him. Perfect for Jim. 100 silk ties at 75 pounds each, though he had never owned a tie and could not knot them. Lacquered objects from Kyoto. Crates of antiques. He came home. He arranged the objects in the Japanese room. He would be diagnosed with HIV the following year. He would never go back. The Golden Pavilion garden in September 1986, the last time. He did not know it was the last time. In September 2023, the Sotheby's auction included a dedicated sale, In Love with Japan. 200 kimonos, prints, and artifacts assembled over 15 years. The total exceeded £2.6 million. A lacquer standing screen fetched £190,000 19 times its estimate. The Hiroshige woodblock print sold as part of the evening sale, which totaled over £12 million. The collection, dispersed. The room, sold with the house. But the record of what it contained, the objects, the prices, the specific choices of a person who had spent 15 years building a private language available in the catalog. The evidence of the love, documented. The evidence of the love, documented. And the specific irony of Freddie Mercury's relationship with Japan is that it was the one major fact of his private life that was never used against him. The tabloids did not find the Japanese room interesting. The biographers treated the collection as background detail. The documentary makers mentioned the kimonos, but did not stop to understand what the collection was. Japan remained, for the 30 years since Freddie Mercury's death, the private part of him that stayed private. Not because it was hidden, because the world did not know how to read it. The fan culture understood. The people who had received him in Japan understood. Peter Freestone understood, which is why the description he gave of Japan and what it meant to Freddie is the most precise summary in the record. Freddie felt some sort of contentment in Japan he found nowhere else. Some sort of contentment. The hesitation in that phrase, the careful qualification of someone who witnessed something real and is trying to name it accurately without overstating it. Some sort of he found it there. He went back every year. And in September 1986, he walked through the garden of the Golden Pavilion for the last time, bought 100 silk ties he could not knot, and came home. April 1975. Nippon Budokan, the fans bowed. They did not grab. Freddie Mercury bought his first kimono. He went back every year. For the concerts. For the shops. For Misa Watanabe in the department store after hours. For the Tokyo streets, where he could walk. For the antique dealers who let him look. For 15 years of woodblock prints and lacquerware and Hakata dolls in glass cases. For the Japanese room at Garden Lodge, with the door closed to everyone except the people he trusted. For the garden at Rokuon-ji in the afternoon with Jim Hutton, the gold on the water, no one watching. The contentment Peter Freestone described. Some sort of contentment, the specific quality of a place that allowed him to be a person. Not a performer. Not a brand. Not the most famous man in the world. A person. Walking down a street. Looking at a print. Not being watched while he looked. He went back every year, and in September 1986, he walked through the Golden Pavilion for the last time. He did not know it was the last time. He came home with 100 silk ties he could not knot. He arranged the objects in the Japanese room. He closed the door. And Japan stayed with him, in that room, in those objects, in those prints, for the 5 years he had left. Some sort of contentment. The only kind that was entirely his.